It's good to be in the Lord's house tonight. I'm glad to be in the Lord's house tonight. I caught you in the middle of a yawn, and I think everybody else, they done quit yawning and went to sleep or something. But it's all good. I'm glad to be here, and it's good to see everybody out tonight. If you got your Bibles, find your way to the book of Ruth tonight. I know I'm kind of breaking our pattern here. And we haven't been back into Matthew or 2nd Chronicles in just a little bit, but the Lord has really been helping me and showing me some things here out of the book of Ruth. And I've learned enough in nearly 10 years in the ministry now that when the Lord is speaking, you hush and just listen. Now, my wife is wishing that I would have learned that a long time ago in marriage, too, that when she's talking, I would just hush. But it doesn't always work out that way for us sometimes. But I know when the Lord's talking, be real good for me to just listen. Daddy used to always say when I was growing up, if I got too mouthy or something like that, tried to insert myself where I didn't need to be, he'd say, hold on now, kids are meant to be seen, not heard. Whatever you think about that, it worked for us. And sometimes when Father is speaking, us and his children need to just let him speak. So I want to let him speak tonight at what he has shown me here out of the book of Ruth. I know we've kind of hammered on verses 1 through 6, and we have dealt with this idea of Naomi and Elimelech and everything that they've had in their hands that they have left out. They left all that stuff in Israel, and they went to Moab, and the Lord took Elimelech, and he took Mahlon and Chilion there, and he brought Naomi back. Verse 21 says she went out full, and she came back in empty. And we've talked about some of the things going on there, but I'd like to get into some of them verses in the in-between there, if I could put it that way. I want to do about verses number 17, or not 17, verse number 7, and go on down there and pick up towards the end of the chapter. But I want to look at the thought tonight of advertising through adversity. I know that title might not make a lot of sense to you right now, but keep it in your mind. I believe it'll pop out what's going on and it'll make sense to us. But we'll find here in the text, as we know the story, that Naomi is fixing to decide. She's heard that God has visited back into the land of Israel and visited his people, and she decides to go on back. And as she's getting ready to go, she's going to talk to Orpah, and she's going to talk to Ruth, and she's going to tell them, I've got no more boys to give you as husbands, as was the custom back then. I can't have those children anymore, even if I could, even if I did have a husband. Would you wait 16, 17, 18, how many years it needed, until they grew up and they were old enough to be your husband? Why would you stay here and wait? I'm not going to ask you to wait. I would rather you go back to your mother's house. Go back to your mother's house. I found that curious, and I'll try to explain why it was mother's house and not father's house here in a minute. But go on back to where you're from. Go on back there, and of course we know that they tell her, no, we're going to go with you, and she tells them again, no, I want you to go back home, and then there's a decision that's made. We know that Orpah has decided that she is not going to stick with Naomi. Instead, she's going to go back to her mother's house and going to go back to her gods, is what the Bible tells us. But Ruth has made the decision to go on and to yoke up with Naomi, to cleave unto Naomi. As I tried to hug Brother Barry Sunday night, and he wouldn't hug me back, and I'm still hurt. I couldn't even hardly sleep after he wouldn't hug me back. But that's the picture we've got here, how that she was wrapping her arms around Naomi and entreats Naomi and says, entreat me not. Don't make me leave. Don't make me go away. Let me stay with you. She is somehow convinced Naomi to not make her go. And I began to think about that there in the text. What in the world has Naomi done? What has Naomi shown Ruth? What is Naomi's personality here? What is such a big draw to make Ruth want to desert her homeland, desert Orpah, desert her little g gods, desert her father and her mother's house, desert her friends and everything she's got, to leave all that and instead to go with Naomi into a land that she has never been to before? What in the world has Naomi done? What witchcraft is this that she has used to convince her that she needs to stay? How's Naomi pulled this off? How's Naomi convinced Ruth? Because it's obvious there's a decision made. Orpah leaves and Ruth wants to stay. What would make Ruth want to stay? Why would Ruth want to be there when Orpah does not? When both Orpah and Ruth are in the same situation, are they not? They're both young widows at this point. They both lost the man that they loved. They both have lost their chance of having children. They have both lost all of these things. They've lost their father-in-law. They're in the same situation. They both live the same way in the same place. They are both from Moab. They both have a family to go back to. I can understand why Ruth would want to go with Naomi if Ruth didn't have nothing left in Moab. That would make sense. Of course, she wouldn't want to live in Moab by herself when she could go back with Naomi. But Naomi specifically tells them to go back to your mother's house. Go back to your mother's house. You have somewhere else to go. Why? Why would she not do that? For whatever reason, Ruth has decided to stay and Orpah goes away. What in the world have they seen in Naomi to make her want to stay? Now I want to bring my title back in. Advertising through adversity. I like to say tonight, when our Christian life is way up here, we're on top of the mountaintop, the bills are all paid, the whole family's saved, the church is booming and growing, God's meeting with us, the altar's slap full. It's real easy for us to get on there and talk about how wonderful God is and how great the church is and how good it is to be a child of God and to be a Christian. But I'd have you know tonight that, yeah, it's great to brag on God in the high times, but what really gets people in, what really brings people under the Father is not necessarily bragging at the high points. It's when we're in the midst of our adversity and God means so much to us that somehow we're still able to praise Him in adversity. Advertising in adversity. What are you saying, Brother Easton? I'm saying that Naomi is in a terrible position of adversity. She's gone through so much. It's so terrible for her right now. But in the midst of that, the way that she has handled herself, carried herself, lived her life, and talked to other people around her, the way she is treating everybody else is doing nothing but pointing to how wonderful a God she serves. Have you thought about that? Naomi, let's be honest here, girl. You left your home, you lost your money, you lost your future, you lost your husband, you lost your boys. You just told your daughter-in-laws to leave out. You're leaving Israel full, and by your own admission, you're fixing to go back in empty. Now's not necessarily the time that I would expect you to be skipping through fields of flowers praising God. To me, it seems more like now would be the time to go sit in ashes with sackcloth and play after Job and go and humble yourself and try to get closer to God and try to get some answers. But I find some things about Naomi here in the text that she doesn't do that. Her actions and the way that she is treating people the whole time are pointing to God. You know what a great, powerful testimony is? When you have somebody that has had the whole world against them. They have fought hell by the acre. Their family has left. Their health is gone. Their marriage is on the rocks. And everything is so bad. And somehow, God means so much to them and has loved on them and helped them so much that they can still stand up and say, in the midst of my valley, I'm still going to praise my God. That's powerful testimony. That's powerful right there. When you can say, my faith in God, and God is such a good God to me, that even when things are awful, He can get me out, and I've got that much faith in Him. That's something big right there. That's something big. If you can sit there and you can show somebody what you're going through that God is enough, He's always enough. He's always more than enough. When you can show that God is there and He's helping and He's taking care of you, everybody else is looking at you saying, they've lost their mind. Life is falling in around them. What is it? Is that Chicken Little that thought the sky was falling? The sky is falling on Chicken Little over here, and somehow they're still praising God. It makes no sense. None whatsoever. How in the world can they make sense of that in their mind that they're still going to point people to God when everything is like that? I'll tell you this. Naomi, in her action, she is advertising for God in the middle of the adversity in her life. That is some of the most powerful testimony that anybody in this room can ever have, is when things are falling apart to still stick with God. And the whole time things are falling apart, you're praising Him in the midst of it. What you're doing is you're advertising for God. You're pointing folks to Him in the midst of it. I saw three things here that I believe they could see about Naomi here. This is both Orpah and Ruth. I believe they could see Naomi's care for those around her. What do you think? It's very obvious that Naomi loved her husband. She had to love him. If you don't believe that, go home to your spouse, look your darling wife in the eyes and say, I think I've decided that we're going to sell everything we got and we're going to move to China. How many of y'all think your spouse is going to go with you? Mine ain't going. She would tell me, we're going to try this long-distance relationship thing. She wouldn't go. Not that she don't love me, but she don't want to go to China. We didn't talk about it. We didn't pray about it. Nothing like that. Elimelech has come in, and Naomi has followed him from the land of her fathers there in Israel, across the mountain range, all the way into a neighboring country with folks that ain't like them, that don't worship like them, and going into that place with her husband. That shows a wife that cares enough about her husband to be in submission to her husband, to follow him and let him be the head of the home. There's care there for the husband. There's care there for the boys as well. Do you know any... I'm not going to ask that. Today's a wicked world. I was going to say, do you know any mama that don't love her boys? But I can't ask that question in today's time because they're leaving them in trash cans and everything else, and it makes me sick. Do you know any good godly mama, maybe I can put it that way, that doesn't love their young'uns? I'll sit there and just watch my kids. And I'm not supposed to be the sappy one. Daddy's not supposed to be the sappy one. That's supposed to be the mama. But I'll sit there and I'll just think about it. And I'll look at it. We was eating supper last night. Nate was in his high chair. And he reached over there and got his cup, put it to his mouth, and drank it out of a straw. And Sue goes, I'm like, kind of looking at her. She said, our kids are growing up. He just grabbed his cup and drank out of it like it was nothing. And I'm like, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. He's getting up and he's trying to walk and everything else, and they're growing up too quick. And when we was on that trip to Orlando, we were talking about having more kids, all the siblings, all Sue's siblings, everything, talking about are they done, are they not done. And me and Sue were talking, and they said, you going to have another one or whatever? And Sue said, well, Easton told me that we got to have at least one more because he wasn't ready for Nate to be the last one, so he didn't savor it as much as he should have. And I honestly told her that. I guess I'm sappy on that. I didn't expect him to be the last one. Lord willing, he won't be the last one. We ain't pregnant before anybody thinks that. We'll just clear that one up real quick. But Lord willing, maybe one of these days we will be. But I look at those kids and I just cannot help but to love them and to care for them. When I got up Saturday and loaded up the family in the trailer and drove to the backside of Blue Mountain over there and picked up that jungle gym thing for Darden just because I wanted her to be able to have something. I want to spoil them. I care for them. I want to love on them and give them everything I can. I believe Naomi can show that love on her kids. She loved them so much and they were worried about things in Israel that she carried them into another land to try to shelter them and try to protect them and try to care for them and still have a relationship with them. She had care for her boys. I find tonight that she had care for her homeland as well. Really? How do you think she heard that God had visited Israel if she wasn't checking up on Israel? I'm trying to tell you tonight that Naomi, she was today what we would call a bleeding heart. She's got a lot of care right there in her heart that she's carrying. She's got a tenderness there, and you can see it in her actions. She cares enough about her folks back home. She cares enough about her friends back home to want to keep up with them and see if God has visited and God has taken care of them or not. But then I find that not only do they see the care there for her husband and her boys and her homeland, I believe that you can see the care there for Orpah and Ruth. She cared for them so very much. She cared for them not as their mother-in-law, but as their own mother. She had so much care and so much desire for them that she was willing to put herself out by herself alone to go back to Israel just so that those girls had a chance to go and have a family that Naomi would never have again. She loved them so much that she laid down her happiness for them to be happy. They're all she's got left. You understand that, right? Her husband's gone. The boys is gone. All she's got at these daughter-in-laws is she's treating them like daughters. And she tells them, head on back. Head on back to your mother's house. Let me read real quick. Verse 7. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. She cares so much about these two daughter-in-laws. I'll send you back to your mother's house. I told you I'd try to explain why it said mother's house instead of father's house. It stuck out to me, Brother Barry. Every time it always says to your father's house. Go back to your father's house, or Father Abraham. It's always been a patriarchal type of deal, not a matriarchal. Patriarchal would be men, matriarchal would be ladies on the side of that. Why back to their mother's house? So I studied on it and looked at it. That illustration or that wording there carries the idea of a home made especially for widowed ladies and all the ladies to live together. It was a place of security, a place of protection, a place of care. Naomi is saying, I love y'all so much. I care for you so much that I don't want you to try to make this trip across these mountains. I don't want you to go back in the uncertainty of Judah. I don't want you to go back into that. I would rather you go back to your mother's house, into a place that has security and has care and has love for you. I'll give up my own happiness. I'll give up my own companionship just because I care for you that much. No greater love hath any man than this, that he lay down his life for his friend. You got me. I appreciate that. She might not have died for these girls, but effectively what she's doing is she has decided that everything in her life that makes it worth living, she's finna just let it all go. And she's going to go and she's going to live out the rest of her days best she can. But she don't want anybody else to suffer alongside of her. That's care. That's love. I believe they saw her care, and that was something special. Have you ever been around somebody and maybe things are not great in their life and they're dealing with something, and instead of them accepting your love and accepting your care, they lash out at you? You ever been around anybody like that? They just take it out on everybody around them. They're having a bad day. That means everybody else got to have a bad day too. You know what I'm talking about? She could have done that too. I know the girls have lost their husbands, but she lost her boys and her husband. She's lost more than them. She's in a worse place than they are. She's not even in her home. At least those girls had family to go back to. She ain't got nothing. Things ain't in a good place for Naomi here. But still, no matter how bad things were around it, she did not lash out at anybody. She was not mean about it. She wasn't ungrateful for what she does have. She spent the time to thank them. She said, may the Lord deal kindly with you. You know what that's saying in today's term? May the Lord bless you. May the Lord take care of you. May the Lord deal kindly with you like you've done with me. Naomi had a lot of care, a lot of tenderness about her. And I believe when they saw the fact that she could have that mentality and that reaction to everything falling down around her, I believe Ruth began to see something in Naomi and think to herself, there might be something to this God that Naomi talks about. There might be something to this. Because everybody else, I don't know anybody that would respond like that. Naomi must have something special about her. I believe they saw Naomi's care. I believe they saw Naomi's pain. Excuse me. I believe they saw her pain. What do you mean pain? Pain of losing a spouse. I can't imagine it. I don't want to imagine it. Anybody that's been through it, I don't want to make light of that or anything like that. I've seen men crippled. One of my good friends in the ministry was there the day that they ordained me, and I tell you, this is the kind of man he is and how on fire he was for God. He got down on top of me when he was praying over me in my ordination, and he prayed out loud for God and everybody in that church to hear, right in my ear. And he wasn't praying quiet neither. He said, God, I pray if he ever gets out of your will and tries to quit preaching that you kill him. I'm serious. I've got his autograph in my Bible right there from all the men that signed my Bible when I was ordained. That's the Bible that I got when I was ordained. His name is in there. He prayed that if I got away from the will of God and if I ever tried to quit preaching and back up on the call, that God would just take me off the field. That's the fire this man had to him. That man was at a tent revival when Sue was lost, and they had prayer before the tent revival, and he got down and began to pray. And he said, Lord, I pray for that young lady that's here that knows she's lost and knows she's going to die and go to hell, that she'll get saved tonight. And when he prayed it, the Lord dropped conviction on Sue. That's the service she got saved in. I'm telling you, this is a man of God. This is somebody that had a touch on him, had no backup, had no quit. The epitome of a leather lung preacher, if I can put it that way. When COVID hit, he lost his wife. And he went. You know, they say when a man and a woman are married and they're longer two, they're now one. You know what I'm talking about? She became his helpmate. They became one. I don't know if I've ever seen another couple on God's green earth that exhibited that as well as those two did. I never saw them apart from each other. They were always right there, conjoined at the hips. And he preached the gospel so strongly. And then when she passed away, everything seemed to run out. He lost his helpmeet. He was at a church one time, and I preached a sermon on being caught in the dark out of Exodus 10 about the plague of darkness. And I was talking about how that it says in the Bible, and I'm spoiling this if I ever want to preach it here, it says the darkness was so dark it was darkness that could be felt. Dark emotions, things that we can feel, anger, grief, depression, fear, all those dark emotions. I was talking about being caught in those things, being caught in deep depression and stuff like that. And he come up to me, big old man, he grabbed me, he hugged my neck and thought he was going to break me in half. And we're there in the lobby of Hurricane Baptist Church. He's going, I'm caught in darkness! And he's crying all over my shoulder, and he's so beat down, he's so broken. And I looked at him and I said, brother, you remember what you prayed over me at my ordination? That if I ever got out of the will of God, that he'd take me out? I said, you better not quit either. He's remarried now and he's preaching the gospel again. I said, glory to God that he got back on it. What I'm simply trying to say is this. Naomi is in pain. She has lost something that to most people will never be replaced. She's lost her helpmeet. She's lost her two boys, her pride and joy. Me and Trey got a message from Mama today, and I'm not trying to be prideful or nothing. I just want to tell you the story that fits well. But Mama texted us today, and somebody had bragged on Trey doing something at school, and somebody had sent her a message about something that I did and said, you raised two good boys. I don't know. If only they really knew the real me, I guess. But they said, you've raised two good boys. And Mama sent back and said, I'm so proud. So proud that people are noticing or whatever. She had two boys that she's proud of. She had two boys that were her world. She had two boys that she wanted to make all over. They're gone. She lost them both. She lost her homeland. She's lost her husband. She's lost her boys. She lost that future dream she had being back in Bethlehem, Judah, there just south of Jerusalem. She's lost all of that. And those girls, those daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth, they could look at her and they could see the pain. I believe they could see her pain. I believe they could see her fear. Because now she's sitting here thinking to herself, there's nothing to keep those two girls here. I've got no more boys to offer to be their husbands. I've got nothing to keep them here in fellowship with me. I know the right thing for me to do would be to turn them back and let them go back to their mother's house. Let them go back and find them another husband so that they can live life with kids and not be like me. But she's scared to death if she doesn't, she's going to be alone. She's scared to death. She's got somewhere around a 7 to 10 day journey across mountains to get back to where she's trying to go. Fear. Fear. It's a scary thing. I believe they could see her fear. I believe they could see her pain. Let me get this next one up here. I believe they could see her anxiety that she's got about the whole situation. I believe they could see the loss. I believe they could see this loneliness in her and think that she's all by herself and nobody's there anymore. But in the middle of everything that Naomi's going for, not only does she thank them and care for them and love on them like she was supposed to, but even in the midst of her terrible pain, she never lashed out. She never blasphemed God. She never got mad about it that we see in the text. She responded in the best way that you possibly can. And how's that, Brother Easton? She picked up her cross daily and she carried it with her like she's supposed to. And she showed strength that we cannot even begin to imagine going through something like that. And what has she done? She has so much about her that she's more worried about those people around her than she is her own self. That's advertising through her adversity right there. I believe they saw Naomi's faith. Her faith. I believe they saw in her faith this idea of acceptance, not bitterness. How many folks could have sat there and said, Lord, we thought we were doing right. I mean, we just had a home. We were just trying to love our kids and love on you and try to raise them right, and now you just took them all from me. You know how easy it would have been to get bitter at God? Looked at that and said, why, God? Why would you do that to me? Why would you let this happen? Why, when all I've done is tried to serve? When we've tried to raise our kids right, we've tried to love on folks, we've tried to show you everywhere we go, and now I'm going through hell by the acre. Why? Maybe it's just me that's been there. But I venture to say we've all been there. We want to ask God, why? Why could you let something like this happen to us? You don't see Naomi do that. You don't see Naomi do that at all, do you? She just accepts it in stride. She takes care of those girls. She says, I'm fixing to head back home where I know the Lord's meeting with folks. Acceptance, not bitterness. When me and Sue, I'm going to tell you real quick, her life story, I guess. When we first got married, Sue was working at B&A Bank there in New Albany, and she loved it. She worked with Miss Lisa. Miss Lisa's probably the reason she loved it. I don't know, she might have been the reason she left. I don't know, Miss Lisa. She loves you, Miss Lisa. She's told me that, and she's told me a bunch of times if she ever goes back to another job, she wants to go back to B&A Bank, and she wants to be a teller because she loved getting to talk to people and to help people. And Sue's a people person. She really is. She got all of that in the group. I'll just be honest with you. But she loved B&A Bank, but she did that, but there's no holidays hardly. And Miss Lisa could tell you that. Don't get off much at all. And we were wanting to get married and talking about having kids. She's like, I want to be able to have more time with the kids when we eventually have them. The Lord blesses us that way. So we were praying, Lord, do something. So a job opened up at North Pontotoc. She was going to be the bookkeeper. She was in school to be an accountant. It was right up her alley. She gets a job there at the school. It works out great. It was a little bit of a pay cut from what she was making at the bank, but we knew the Lord was going to take care of us on that. It was going to give her summers off. She's going to get Christmas and Thanksgiving and spring break. She's getting every day off that the kids are getting off. And it was going to be great. It was an answered prayer. And then she comes around and she says, hey, I think I want to try to go work for Medical Solutions. And this was during the COVID days, and Medical Solutions is a traveling nurse firm, I guess is what you'd call it. And Sue got a job with them. It was a job that let her work from the house. She never had to go into the office. She had flexible hours. During Bible conference, she would literally carry her computer to the church, listen to a service, go back in there and work for 30 minutes, and come back and go back out into church. That's the way it worked. We went on vacation to Gatlinburg, and we did a hotspot on my phone, and she's sitting in the passenger seat, and she's working as we're going down the road. That's a dream job if I've ever heard of one. It was a great job. It paid $45,000 a year. Unlimited time off, and all y'all are thinking, give me an application. I want to sign up, right? But she's got this gravy job. We've been praying that the Lord would give her more time off. He's given her all the time off in the world. Darden is now a part of the picture there. So Sue's taking care of her at the house. Everything is great. We're doing wonderful. We're making more money together than we ever have in our lives before. And then all of a sudden Sue comes in and says, hey, God's telling me to quit my job. And I looked at her and I said, he ain't told me nothing. Keep working. God's honest truth. Why? Because I had to do a little bit of soul searching, because I'm sitting there thinking, God, I prayed and prayed and prayed, and you answered a prayer with that job, and what you've blessed me with, now you're taking it away. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Why would you bless me with it and then take it away from me? I wonder if Naomi's sitting there thinking to herself, why would you bless me with a husband and bless me with these boys and bless me with a home? Why would you do that? Why would you bless me with a full house just to take it away from me? And I had to be real careful not to get bitter. Real careful. And I prayed on it, and I prayed on it, and I prayed on it. And it's just the way the Lord works. I was now making more money by myself at MDOT than me and Sue were together when we first got married, when she was working at B&A Bank. God said, you can make it back then, you can make it now. So I called Sue and I said, Sue, quit your job. I said, I still don't have peace. I said, the Lord still hasn't told me that you need to come home. But what the Lord told me was, I better get out of your way because I'm keeping you from serving the Lord, and that's not a good place for a spouse to be. So I got out of her way, and I had to trust her judgment and trust her discernment that God was telling her to come home. So she gave up a $45,000 a year work-from-home job with unlimited time off. The job that people pray and spend their whole lives trying to get. She gave it up. We took the pay cut. This is just God. This is just God. And I don't want to get into a bunch of money stuff, but I'll say this. What we lost within a year or two, God had already given us half of that back in raises at work and raises at Locust Grove when I was there. You know what that is? That's God. That's God saying, yeah, you could have got bitter, you could have got upset, you could have got mad, you could have quit, you could have been all upset because I took something from you that was a blessing. But instead, don't get bitter. Accept what's going on and realize that God's plan is so much higher than ours. And because of that, now I'm here. And half of y'all are thinking, dear God, I wish he would have kept the job. Sorry, you stuck with me now. No. Naomi, she has all the right in the world to be upset about what is going on. But we don't see bitterness out of her. We see acceptance. We see gratitude, not aggression. She doesn't lash out at those two girls. She doesn't lash out at them. She doesn't try to run them off like that. Not out of a sense of being mad, but out of a sense of care and love for them. We don't see callousness. We see tenderness. And we don't see her running away. We see her returning to where God was. Can I show you something in the text? I hope you've maybe noticed it real quick. Look in verse number 8. I just want to point out how much Naomi is pointing to the Lord in this text. Verse 8, she says, the Lord deal kindly with you. Verse 9, she says, the Lord grant you. She's already pointing out the Lord. Verse 13, she says, the Lord has gone out against me, but what word or how did she phrase or spell the word Lord there in the text? It was Lord, all caps. It's the highest name of respect given to God in the Hebrew language. She still respects God. She still loves God, even though she feels like God's against her. How in the world can somebody do that? Goes on down more, and they talk about Lord again. In verse 17, Ruth all of a sudden is calling him Lord and giving him respect and glory out of seeing Naomi do it. Then it goes on down, and let me point something out in verse number 20. Tell in verse 19, she goes in, and the city looks at her and says, is this Naomi? Remember I made that illustration Sunday night of Naomi, what happened to you? We don't hardly recognize you. Is this Naomi? I did some study on that. You know what Naomi's name means? It means pleasant delight. Everybody that looked at Naomi couldn't help but have a smile on their face, because that was the testimony of Naomi. But then she goes on a little bit further. You don't want to know why she changed her name from Naomi? Because in her heart, she's sitting there thinking, there's no way I can be pleasant and delight in what is going on around me. She says, call me not Naomi. Don't call me a pleasant delight anymore. Call me Mara. You know what Mara means? Bitter. Bitter. Praise, I thought you said she didn't get bitter. I said we couldn't see her bitterness. She didn't act out on her bitterness. It's not that she just sat there and looked at everything terrible that was happening to her and just was still skipping through the flowers chasing butterflies. It's not that it didn't affect her. It's not that she was callous. It's not that she just said, it'll be fine, and just kept on going. No, it did get to her. She did in her own heart and her own soul. She was bitter about the whole thing. She was broken down about it. But because she felt that bad, she never let it get between her and God. You know what the difference between Naomi is and us Christians today? I said us, that means me too. I don't want anybody to ever think that I'm preaching down to anybody. I try to put myself in the middle of the sermon as much as I can. I try to do that. If you feel like I'm preaching down to you, I'm terribly sorry. That's not my intention at all. You know what our problem is today? A lot of times something happens. A lot of times we get upset. A lot of times we have bitterness in us. And it's not necessarily a bad thing when we want to ask God why, or when we definitely get bitter because something is going wrong in our life. It becomes a problem when we don't give it to God and flush it out. And instead it swells up in our hearts and gets so big that it pulls us away from God. It makes us want to kick the neighbor's cat and everything else. When it affects us like that, that's when it becomes a terrible, terrible problem. But you know what Naomi did? Everybody else around her, they still saw her as Naomi. In her heart, she felt like she was bitter, even though she didn't let it affect her relationships. She didn't let it get between her and God. She's still calling him Jehovah God. She's still calling him Lord, all caps. She's still giving him that moniker of praise there. She's still giving him all the respect that he's so due. Let me ask you something else. I'm going to tell you something else. She calls herself Mara, which means bitter. Anybody want to take a guess how many times the word Mara is used in your Bible? One time, Brother Dennis. You guessing or did you know that? Good guess. One time. The only person that ever looked at Naomi and said, "That's bitter," was Naomi herself. My goodness. What an advertisement that would be for the Father. When everything is going terrible and our life is falling apart around us and we're scared and we're lonely and we're broken and we feel that God has deserted us. She says that God has been heavy-handed with her. She said God has laid his hand on her. God has touched her. God has been on her. God has worked her over real good. She's got all that going on in her mind. But she has such a desire to keep God in his place of respect, to go to him and to give him that the only person that realizes how bad it is her. Because she hasn't let that get out and affect anybody else. She hasn't got on Facebook and talked about, well, this is some God that I serve. Now I'm going through troubles and trials all the time. Well, that's some church that I go to. Man, I had my tonsils out last week and they didn't even pray for me. They didn't even check on me. I've had an ingrown toenail for 6 months. Well, dear God, we don't know you got an ingrown toenail. How are we supposed to pray for you on that? We're so quick when something affects us for everybody else to pay the price. I can't remember, it's a little nursery rhyme or a Mickey Mouse or something, but there's a lion that's a circus lion and he's mean to everybody and he's growling at everybody. Come to find out he had a splinter in his paw. And whatever the main character is, I cannot remember where I come up with this, but I've seen it somewhere years ago. But when the little old mouse or whatever it is, the main character goes in there and pulls that splinter out of the paw of that lion tempers down. That lion becomes friendly. That lion takes care of that little old mouse or whatever it was. The whole demeanor of that lion changed when he was no longer in pain. When we as Christians find ourselves in pain, whether it's physical or it's emotional or some mental pain, and we feel like somebody's out to get us, or we feel that God has done us a disservice, we don't have the ability of Naomi here to just point everybody to God and how good he is in our situation. A lot of times all we want to do is have people tell us how bad we got it and pet on us and coddle us, when at the end of the day what we ought to be doing, instead of taking it to man that can't help, is taking it to God and let him do it. These times where things are bad, these times of adversity, they're not the time for us to go around and bash God and the church and bash everything there is to bash. No, no, no. These are the times to crawl up in the arms of God and do some advertising for him on how good he's been for us. How good he's been for us. You know, a lot of times we find ourselves in these same situations. And I want us to understand tonight, how in the world did Naomi have the strength, have the faith? How am I going to get to that point where when my whole world is crumbling around me, that I can still say, you see God over there? He's taking such good care of me. How in the world can Naomi get to that point with all that she's going through, to where her actions are pointing to God and are so convincing that it has convinced Ruth to not only leave her homeland and to leave her people, but to leave her gods and make God of Naomi her God? That's convincing stuff right there. How in the world has Naomi done it, and how can I get there? How can we as Christians get to that point to where even in our adversities we're still using our life to advertise God? I want to let you in on a groundbreaking secret. Everybody listen, everybody look at me real quick. You don't know how you get there? You can't. At least not by yourself. Because in our flesh, in our mind, we don't have the ability to look at all that and see God in it. We don't have the ability to look at that and be excited about what's going on and still show gratitude. It's not until we bring that unto the Father, we bring that unto God and give it unto Him, that He gives us peace and comfort in that. What's the book of Corinthians say? God of all comfort. That means you can't get it nowhere else. He holds it all. He gives it out. You don't know why a lot of times when we do have troubles, we do have problems, we do have trials, and things are so big that we're lashing out at everybody around us and we're bitter and we're upset and we can't seem to get done with this thing? Because we've carried it to everybody else. We've held it in our own minds, and about the time we're about to get over it, we rehearse it again and say, I can't believe they treated me that way. I can't believe they had that to say to me. When really what we need to be doing is leaving all that stuff behind and carrying it over here to the throne room and carrying it to God and saying, God, I can't do this by myself. Lord, the battle is too big. The problem is too much. The bitterness is too bad. God, I cannot go on like this anymore. I've got to have some help. Let Him help. Let Him take care of us. You remember in the Lord's Prayer, though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I will feel no evil. Why? Because He is with me. What's the difference? When David is walking through the valley of the shadow of death, when he's there and there's enemies all the way around him and there's troubles and there's trials and his life is in danger, when things are so bad, how's he able to stay and not have fear and not have worry? Because God's right there in the middle of it with him. And if we'll take things to God, we're in the middle of our troubles, we're in the middle of our trials, things seem to work out a lot better. You know the rest of that, Psalms 23, there it goes on to talk a little bit more. It says that God prepares him a table in the presence of his enemies. God didn't get rid of the enemies. He just made them watch David eat. I bet you he made a mistake. And I bet the wind was blowing right towards those enemies. And David was smacking. Sounded like Nate eating a french fry. So he's sitting there smacking on that filet mignon or whatever he's got. I don't know what he had back then. That's just my imagination. But you see, the key to Naomi making it through this, the key to her not lashing out, the key to her not being bitter, the key to her having gratitude and acceptance of everything that's going on in her life is still the fact that God was still Lord in her life. She still had Him up in a place of respect. She still had Him a place where He deserved to be. Now I'll give you an illustration. I'm going to be done tonight, okay? I know that's dangerous. When I was in high school, I was playing baseball, as I've told y'all before, and my throwing partner was Adam Wilder. Didn't matter if it was practice, didn't matter if it was a game. We never had to hunt around to find our partner. He was my partner every single time. I mean, at that point, it's about like a relationship. If he threw with somebody else, I'd have felt cheated on. I mean, we were like that, and we just always threw together. We knew what we was going to do. He's going to be in the field, and I was going to get the fence. That way, if he threw one bad, I could walk to the fence and get it, and I'd have to chase all the way to center field. But anyways, he was my throwing partner. About the time that we were in high school, his dad was a logger, Mr. Tim Wilder. He got a brain tumor. Brain cancer, tumor. You know what I'm talking about, rocking your world. Just took the air out of everybody. It was just such an awful thing. He began to forget everybody around him. He couldn't remember names. Things were just so very bad. And they couldn't really do anything for it to fix it. And I won't forget one of his testimonies. He said he was laid in that hospital bed and he remembered just asking God, just praying, said, Lord, just let me remember somebody. Let me remember these people. And he said the only thing that he could think about was the verse saying, I am that I am. The Lord kept showing him that over and over and over again. But Tim Wilder, he went to a tent revival, and I so happened to be there. And they asked Mr. Tim to pray to dismiss at the tent revival. And I will never forget. Cold chills run up and down my back, and I felt about this big. Because that man that's sitting there fighting brain cancer, having a hard time remembering those around him that he loved so very much. He had his son Adam and his twin sister Abby, and they're nearly to the age where they could graduate and get out of school, and he's trying to make it to their graduation so he can share that moment with his kids. And they've asked him to pray. And he begins to pray, and I'll never forget what he said. He got up and he said, God, thank you for my tumor. And I'm thinking, he's lost it. Thank you for my tumor. He said, because if I never would have had this tumor, I never would have been this close to you. I never been this close to my family. I never would have been this deep into my prayer life. He was able to stand up in the very adversity that was eventually going to claim his life and call upon God and say, thank you for letting me go through this, because of this tumor, I'm closer to you than I've ever been. My family is closer to you. My family is closer knit to me. That's tough. That's tough. How can we get to the point to where in the middle of something like that, we can still call out to God and say, thank you for the trials. Thank you for what I'm going through. The answer is you will never be able to if it's just you in that trial. But if God's in the middle of it, he's got his arms around you, and he's loving on you, and you're staying close to him and faithful to him, and you're trying to do your best to point everybody to him in that trial, you can make it. You can make it. You can make it. It might not be easy. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. Naomi would tell you that her life was not easy. It was hard. But Naomi stuck with God and kept God in his place. And somebody else was seeing what she was advertising. And because of that, this little Moabite woman by the name of Ruth saw Naomi and said, if her God is so big and so wonderful to her that in the midst of her life being this miserable mess, that she just wants to go back where he's working and wants to stick with him, then there must be something to that God. I'm going to leave my little G gods and I'm going to go with him. And her people are going to be my people, and her God is going to be my God. All because in the mess, Naomi was advertising in the middle of her adversity. It's important tonight. I know we go through things. I know that y'all have troubles and trials that I could not even begin to comprehend. I don't want to sit here and tell you that your problems are not big or anything like that. I understand they're very, very big. In the eyes of the one in the midst of that trouble, it's always big. It doesn't matter if it's a 4-year-old praying for that goldfish they lost. It's big to them. We got big problems in our lives, and I don't want to belittle that. But I just want you to know tonight that in the midst of that trial, you can still be advertising for God. You can still be advertising how good he is. You can advertise his love, his grace, his mercy, his patience. You can advertise his long suffering. You can advertise his tender care towards us in the situations that we're dealing with. Because while you're going through that, somewhere there's a Ruth watching. Somewhere there's some little old gal or some little old boy, or it's a grandbaby, or it's something like that, and they're watching to see how mama and daddy and granddaddy and grandma, they're watching the coworker. They're watching to see if we're going to make it through that, if we're going to stick with God through the midst of that pressure, if he means enough to us for us to stay with him when it's hard, or if we're going to let it all go and we're going to turn away and we're going to leave. Ladies, y'all come up and play tonight. Let's all stand.